When you are admitted to a hospital, they place on your wrist a white wristband with your name on it. But there are other different colored wristbands, which symbolizes other things. The red wristband are placed on dead people. There was one surgeon who worked on night shifts in a school hospital. He had just finished an operation and was on his way down to the basement. He entered the elevator and there was just one other person there. He casually chatted with the woman while the elevator descended. When the elevator opened, another woman entered. When the doctor slammed the close button and punched the button to the highest floor, surprised, the woman reprehended the doctor for being rude and asked why he did not let the other woman in. The doctor said, "That was the woman I just operated on. She died. I was doing the operation. Didn't you see the red wristband she was wearing?" The woman smiled, raised her arm, and said something like this. Ah! Sorry. The unbranded laptop. My brother moved out of the house back in 2002. Once he got a job as a computer technician, and he recently went missing. When I went to his house, it was locked, with 3 sheets of printer paper taped to the front door. While coming home from work one day, I noticed someone had left their damaged gray laptop laying in the middle of my driveway. One day, I got out of my car to examine it more carefully. The LCD definitely showed signs of user-related damage, as there was a large hole on the left side of the screen that fit a standard Philippines head screwdriver perfectly. There was a webcam above the display as well, and it was also destroyed with the same screwdriver. Other than those, however, everything else on the computer showed minor signs of wear. Like almost all the keyboards were faded, but nothing to extent that it could be considered unusable. I looked at the back of this display to find out what brand it is, and yet I couldn't find anything. I looked at the entire laptop shell, and there was no text or logo stating what brand it was. In fact, there was no warranty or no proof of license sticker on the bottom. No text whatever. What's even more odd is the fact that the only ports on the laptop was a VGA port for connecting and display and a USB port. How long could this laptop have possibly run without charging port to recharge the battery? It must have been a very low-end laptop where you had to remove the battery pack and put it into its own charging dock. Why did exactly have a webcam though? Curious as to what laptop it's on. What exactly is on the laptop? Blech. I ran inside to the basement where my old desktop was currently being stored. The only reason it was down there is I forgot to bring it to the behemoth to the local Sarcan to recycle it. I would have been currently using it as my regular computer, but it takes 5 or 6 hours to fully boot because the system always goes through recovery mode every time you start it. And the processor is way too slow to recover. Every time on the 500 gigabyte hard drive, I had to install it a 120 MHz Pentium. Professor doesn't get you far. Well, anyways, I removed the old LG CRT monitor from the desktop and plugged it onto the laptop. I went to push the power button when I stopped. There's no way this is going to work. The battery has to be dead by now. Click, what? Clicking stuff. I rummaged around the basement to find my battery voltage tester and immediately withdrew the battery from the laptop and checked the voltage. Lo and behold, it had no charge. Well, might as well just leave it down here. I'll bring all this computer junk to Sarkan tomorrow morning. With that, I unplugged the display from the laptop, put it back into the desktop, and simply left everything downstairs. After leaving the basement, I went to go watch TV for about 3 hours before going to bed. I stopped. There's no way this is going to work. The battery has to be dead by now. I rummaged around the basement to find my battery voltage tester and immediately withdrew the battery from the laptop and checked the voltage. Lo and behold, it had no charge. Well, might as well just leave it down here. I'll bring all of this computer junk to Sarkan tomorrow morning. With that, I unplugged the display from the laptop, put it back in the desktop, and simply left everything downstairs. After leaving the basement, I went to go watch TV for about 3 hours or so before going to bed. I was suddenly awakened from my deep slumber by the sound of the Windows 2000 startup jingle and fell out of my bed. It was so deafeningly loud, I swore someone was holding a pair of speakers right next to my ear. After I fell out of bed, I stood up in a groggy daze, and for a minute or so trying to figure out what that sound was. The desktop. I must have accidentally hit the power switch while trying to switch monitors. Something walked to the basement but froze in the middle of my steps. I just remembered there was no way my computer could have started up because I have Windows 95 installed. Reluctant to go down the steps after that, but my common sense started kicking in, and I thought I must be getting my OS mixed up. When I walked down, I was shocked to see that my desktop wasn't on. In fact, I remembered it wasn't even plugged in. I had to make sure of it, though. I checked behind the desktop, and everything else was plugged in, except for the tower. There's absolutely no chance of that laptop turning on. That's impossible. I removed the battery from the laptop again and rechecked the voltage. This time, I couldn't get a direct number. The voltage tester was going insane. I reinserted the battery, pressed the power button on the laptop. Some indicator lights flashed, meaning that the computer definitely started. Except this time, the startup jingle wasn't played at all. I need to see what's going on here. I connected the CRT monitor back into the laptop, and what I saw was a bare desktop with 3 icons in the corner. The taskbar was empty, and there was no start menu. The wallpaper was black. Why would anyone do this to their desktop? Anyone could remove all the icons, but they must be pretty skilled hackers to remove the start menu button of all the 3 icons. One was a gamer folder, one was a video folder, and the last was the DOS command prompt program. Maybe this was a kid's laptop. Clicking on the games folder confirmed my suspicion it was a little girl who must have owned this laptop. I felt some remorse for the poor girl because there was only one game in the folder. And I have no idea what it was. The program name was Princess.exe. I clicked on it just to see what the game was like. Full animal title screen came out with very strict fairy tale princesses twirling across the screen. The logo flew down with a bunch of sparkly dolls holding it. The game is called Princess. Creator, make yourself beautiful. So it must have been one of those low-budget put GPGs of various clothing items into a photo of yourself games. Well, I was right. As many popped up, I was given the option to dress up or to view pretty pictures. I wanted to see what the girl looked like, so I clicked the second option. She had to have been no more than 5, and on top of that, she looked very cute. She was either Mexican or Spanish origin. She wore a somewhat tattered white dress with small red frills around the sleeves and collar. It had small roses on it. I smiled as she looked like she had a lot of fun putting a virtual tiara on her head. However, browsing through the photos about halfway, there are pictures of rooms with nothing else but a bed inside. She must have been dodging the camera for fun of it. I guess after that, I felt I've seen enough with that program. Might as well go see the other 2 files in it. I decided to go into the command prompt and see if I could locate any other files on the hard drive. I simply got a slanted face arrow line with no drive letter. Okay, this is really strange, I thought. I typed into the command start C to see if I could open the dictionary I wanted to explore. Why did I say dictionary? Okay, the directory I wanted to explore. Well, I pressed enter and DOS came and stated start is not recognized as an external or external command. Readable programs or batch file. After a few seconds, the program crashed, bringing me back to the desktop. So I guess the last thing to look is at the videos. As I double-clicked the folder, the screen faded black. I thought it had crashed, but I didn't notice there was a small flashing in the top left corner, showing that the text start/videos z1.wmv flashed briefly, then a video appeared in full screen. It was a girl again. This time, she was smiling, bouncing slightly in excitement. Happiness made my heart feel warm. My guess was she must have been recording. Duh. Oh, been recording herself play the dress-up game. With the webcam. At first, she was simply moving her fingers across the trackpad, clicking and giggling excitedly for a bit. She must have been laughing at the things she put on herself in the game. After about 2 minutes or so, the screen would cut to black for a fraction of a second, and it would return to a girl playing the game. This time, however, she was dressed differently in a simple pink t-shirt with the words, "Go, go, girl," stitched in glitter. I guess the game would simply record her every time she started it, without her knowing. That made me some sort of easy. I mean, why would anyone program a game to do that? Whatever. I think it's going to be some sort of thing over and over with this video. I may as well turn off the computer. I reached over and pressed the power button. It didn't shut off this time. The video continued to play, and I saw the girl this time was wearing an orange top with nothing on it. She was smiling and giggling as usual. So I thought to myself, I can turn off the computer after the video is done. Couldn't be long. The video seemed to drag on, with more cuts of her playing the game in a different outfit, and I started to doze off. However, the next cut in the video, the girl was just staring at the camera with an expressionless look on her face, wondering what the crap was going on. I became interested in the video again. This one didn't make me smile. It made me extremely uneasy watching her without her usual smiley face put on. It was a dark room, and there was one desk light on its side. She was in some sort of nightwear. What is she going to do? She sat there for minutes with a blank expression, like she wasn't thinking at all. I just started to get really tense, as if something awful was about to happen. She bent over and picked up a handsaw from the left side of where she was sitting. She held it in front of her, showing it to the camera. Then she placed on jagged blade on the side of her cheek. I cringed at what I was seeing. What on earth is going on? Slowly she began slicing into her right cheek. Blood drizzled down her neck as she did it. Slowly, the side of her teeth began to show for about 10 seconds. As the saw went lower down her face, more of her teeth began to show on the side. Blood almost covered everything on the right side of her face. She eventually got to the bottom of her jawbone and sawed a tiny piece off of it too. Her cheek fell to the ground with a simple thud, and she put the saw on her lap and continued to stare at the camera, emotionless. I couldn't take much more of this and tore the battery out of the vent. The video continued to play. The next again, the girl screamed in extreme pain. I almost fell out of my seat. It was so loud. She screamed and put her hands over her now absent cheek. She continued to scream in agony for about 10 seconds. Then a knocking. Oh, come on, my dumb dog. Then a knocking was heard from the side. It was a woman yelling in language I can't understand. She was pounding the door, but not opening it. The girl must have locked it. I tried to unplug the monitor from the laptop, but it was stuck in. I didn't want to see what happens next. The screaming continued, and the yelling continued up until the next cut. She was back into her mission state again, but her cheek was still missing. The woman was pounding the door and yelling still. That woman must be your mother. The girl then raised the saw up to her right shoulder and began cutting just as slow as the last time. I gagged at the sight of this. It was Holocaust of wrong. The blood began to stream out of her in all directions. The yelling behind the door fell silent. I bet she's trying to get someone to help her, either father or brother, or whatnot. When she hit the bone, an awful grinding noise could be heard. I covered my ears, but I could still hear it vividly through my hands. I noticed that a piece of her muscle got stuck on one of the steel teeth of the saw. This cut ended a lot faster than before, and the next cut was the same thing, except the color of her face began to drain, and her pain when extremes became quickly weaker. Closing is completely red with the blood on the right side. Then it became motionless again. Oh God, what is she going to cut off next? The mother returned back with what seemed to be 2 other people, and they were all yelling at the same language for her. She raised a saw and began to cutting off her right side of her head. Loud thuds again at the door. They were trying to knock it down. She slowly worked her way down, with blood going down in all directions. The thuds still repeated themselves on the door. I was mostly confused out as how she kept going even after she went through her brain with the saw. Her right eye rolled into the back of her head. Blood began leaking out of it. She eventually made it to the top of her mouth, where she hacked her way through bones and teeth. It was the single worst sound I have ever heard in my entire life. I still hear it in the back of my mind some days. The thuds continued, and deep in the back of my mind, I hoped that they wouldn't be able to break down the door, so they didn't have to see such an awful sight. She finally made it through, and with that, the right side of her head fell to the side of her neck, held on only a piece of skin on her neck. I remember the chilling sound of her jaw being unhinged from her head, and it was tugged violently by the force of her half head. She put the saw down to her side. The cut ended, and the next cut, she simply fell face down onto the desk. Half her brain fell onto the desk from the impact, and her eye was removed from its socket. Blood pooled on the desk. The people trying to break down the door finally made it in, and they almost blacked out from what they saw. Their daughter was in pieces. The mother vomited and ran out of the room. The father ran to her daughter, put her head back together, and cried, holding her head on its side. The other woman, presumably the daughter's older brother, simply stared in the horror at what he saw. The horrifying self-mutilation finished with that cut, and the screen cut to the empty room with the bed. With a sigh of relief that it was over, I just sat there, breathing heavily and sweating. I didn't realize that the room was so hot until now. I have so many questions. How was that possible? I was scared. 30 minutes sitting in the chair, and finally, I got the courage to get up. I looked at the laptop for what I hoped was the last time. The room with the bed glared on the screen. Then it cut to something else unexpectedly. It was a cut of my face in the basement using the laptop.